a part of our vision for Black, Brown, and Bilingue is really elevating Black and Brown students and their identities. However, as part of that conversation, we've talked a lot about the Black-Brown divide that does exist, and it is not maybe a very popular conversation. But for those people who maybe assume that the Black and Brown communities are united, there has historically and still is today a division that exists. And so really wanting to be able to bring more unity there. But we've also talked about, in particular, being, the impacts of being bilingual, the impacts of being millennials in leadership, the impacts of being Black and Brown in leadership. And so talking on quite a few of those different topics. We've interviewed some different folk, just talking about, mental health was our major topic for this month, as Mental Health Awareness Week is at the beginning of October. So
expand on that a little bit. That's interesting.
So there is a popular thought process that Black and Brown people do not access mental health at the same rate as white Americans do. So statistically speaking, if you're talking about going to talk to a counselor, that's true. Some of the negative impacts of that are where a white teenager may be diagnosed with depression. Black teenagers are often being diagnosed with things like some type of a behavioral disorder instead of the emotional disorder, right? So the response to those things is a little bit different. So I think that's an important piece. But one of the things we got a chance to talk with a Latina counselor who specializes in counseling for people of color. She's out of the city of Chicago. Her name is Lou Rocha. And one of the things she talked about was that she views herself as a healer, and that, in the Black community, maybe you're going and talking to a pastor, and that happens, right? So where maybe they're not going to somebody who is a psychologist, they're going to talk to a pastor. Or in the Latino community, they're going to talk to and now I'm going to blank on the word. I think it's curadote or something like that. But basically, it relates back to this idea of like this medicine person. Right? There's an elder in the community who you can go and talk to, and that it's different than maybe going and talking to a psychiatrist. Yeah. But it is still a healer. It's somebody who's meant to help.
It's so right, and this is something that is, for whatever reason, come on my and our radar recently as well. I didn't realize, I wasn't as aware of the stigma of mental health in certain minority communities. I wasn't aware of it. In fact, I only found out about it. I wonder if I could connect you with this group, Minority Psychology Network. I think one part of their work is working to break the stigma. And the other is sort of recognizing that even within clinical psychology, that maybe the concerns of Black and Brown and undersupported communities sort of at large, maybe those specific sort of nooks and crannies of psychology are under-investigated by comparison. You know what I mean? So maybe even the concerns in certain communities, maybe that's not in the textbook, so maybe the support, even if they were to seek it out in that traditional way, might not be there.
Yeah, it's incredibly important. In education, we talk about being culturally responsive. And I think, too, in the field of mental health, you have to be culturally responsive. Yeah. You have to have an understanding that if you're talking to a young Latina whose mom is very strongly Catholic, her mom's answer is going to be, we don't talk about family problems outside of the house. You just need to pray about it. And so how how can I be responsive to that, to the idea that maybe this person is walking into my office carrying the guilt of even coming to see me, which is adding to,
right,
whatever else is the issues that maybe brought that person there.
It's powerful.
I think the other piece that again, Lou Rocha talked about was two ideas, and that is the ideas of intergenerational trauma and historical trauma. And so she talked a lot about Native Americans, how if you're being raised on a reservation today, and we can point the finger today and say, look at alcoholism is bad and abuse is bad, but there's something to that, right? There's history there that has caused trauma.
Right.
There's intergenerational. There were generations of Native Americans in the early 1900s that were pulled off the reservation. Their hair was cut, their names were changed, their language was taken. And so now, what's the impact of that on even today, right? And then the idea of historical